like class average right either.
Yeah.
I think I actually got that.
Oh, I flipped it. You said like 50 seconds.
You gotta join a bunch of tables.
Sitting there every day. Monday, usually my class. Yeah.
I was like saying, you said like really well on your face.
Yeah. I'm not saying
So like how are you doing today? Good. So I'd like to ask you, how was the midterm? This course? Claire? Should I because what too easy, should I take your final exam? Should I make it more difficult?
No.
Good. So we'll see. I see how you perform in the midterm. So if I point out it was too easy, then maybe increase the difficulty. Okay, so last session we discussed different DML commands. So we I think covered select statement, order by, insert. So by now I would expect you to know first the DDL command, the definition language command, right? Which are create, right, alter, and drop. So to create a table, to change the structure of the tables, right, and drop to just drop or delete the table completely, including the primary keys, indexes, and everything, right? So these are all about the structure of your tables, right? And then in this new module, we covered DML commands. And DML commands stand for Data Manipulation Language, right? And for DML command, we said we have several commands, like for example, select, insert, right? And what else? Update, right? And so we said we use select if we want to, for example, retrieve some data from our tables. For example, you can use select star if you want to get all the columns. Get the data from all the columns in your table. Or you can just explicitly specify which columns you would like to retrieve. Let's say, for example, your table has 10 columns. You only want to retrieve 2 of them. Let's say student ID and student name. Or, for example, only getting a student name and, a student number, right? So you can then specify the column name just after select segment. We also talked about insert. So you should be able to use insert to insert data into your SQL tables. So you just have insert into table name, right? And then you can, this is optional, you can specify the column names and then the data, or you can just skip the column names and enter the data, but you should make sure they are in the correct order as the column names. And then we talked about update and delete statements. So update was just to update the data within your tables, right? So for example, let's say you want to change the salary of an employee. You want to change the grade of a student, right? So in these cases, you only want to change the data in your tables. So that's why you should use update, not alter. But if I, for example, ask you to add a column to your table or change the data type of the column, then in that case, you're using alter, right? Because alter is about the structure. And then you have delete, so if you want to put specific data into your table. So these are all about the data in your table. And then we talked about different clauses that we have. We, for example, covered order by, right, group by a little bit. So these are the list of clauses that you need for this class, for this course. So select distinct from specifying from which table you are getting your data, right? And then where you specify the condition, or you use that to filter your data. And then order by, just to sort the result based on specific column or columns. We also covered that. We can order data, for example, based on a column in ascending or descending order. And what was the default? Ascending, right? But if you want to specify the descending, you have to explicitly specify that. And then we talked a little bit about group by, but we're not finished with that yet. We need more practice. Today I'm going to cover group by having join, and let's also practice with that. And what was the difference between select and select distinct? Yeah.
Select can get like duplicate rows.
Yeah. So if you want to get rid of like these duplicated rows in your result, then you can use select distinct. For example, if you remember that staff table that was the example in your slides, in staff table we had a column, I think job, right? And then under job column we had, for example, manager, employee, sales, etc. But they were repeated, right? So if you want to, let's say you have a table with 100 rows, and you only want to get distinct values of, for example, job in that column, which are maybe 3 or 4, then you can use select distinct, right? You're getting rid of like getting all those 100 rows. And then where should I explain? From specifying which table you want to get the data from. So how many of you have already created these 2 tables? Okay. How many of you have not even connected to your SQL? So I want to just check how many of you are actually practicing with me in the class. Okay, that's good. And so it would be great. It's not mandatory, but like if you practice here, like for example, in the previous session, some students had trouble with their login or other issues, then I can help you with that. And so we covered these examples, and then order-wise sorting the final query results, right, in ascending or descending order. And we also explained how we can, for example, order or sort based on multiple columns, right? In that case, for instance, you have here, let's say you want to select these 2 columns, department number and staff name from staff table, and then you want to sort the results by both columns. And so if you write, let's say, order by department number, staff name, descending, it means we want to sort the result based on this first column, which is department number. And is this ascending or descending order? Ascending or descending? Everyone. Ascending, right? Because we didn't specify anything here. So you would expect, like this is the second query, so this second table is the result of the second query, right? So you would expect to see the department number column sorted in ascending order, which means D15 comes before D20, comes before D, for example, 38, and so on. Now, within each department, we have several employees working in that department, right? So, for instance, we have D20 Pernal and then D20 O'Brien. So, how do we know which one is first? This is where to specify that, right? For example, when you specify staff name descending, it doesn't mean that this column staff name is sorted in descending order. It just means that within each department, staff names are sorted in descending order, right? So you still have, for example, standards coming after names, right? But this is because these are in different departments. Now within each department, let's say for example, B20, B20, if we have standard and kernel, then this is getting sorted based on descent order. And then what else? And we talk about top 3. So I also explained that for some of you, especially if you have worked with MySQL or SQLite, you may not be familiar with this. So this is similar to limit clause that you were using there. So for example, let's say in this example, I wrote select top 3 staff name salary from staff, order by salary. So what does this query return? Let's focus on the simplified version first. Let's say I write select staff name salary from staff, order by salary. So what would that return? Yeah?
The salary of all the staff members ordered from lowest to highest salary?
Yeah, so if you write select staff name to salary from staff order by salary, right, it means you want to get like these 2 columns, staff name and salary, which you see here, from the staff table, order by salary, which means you want to sort the results, sort the rows of your tables based on this column, which is salary. Now, in what order, ascending or descending? Because we didn't specify anything, it means ascending. Now, in ascending order means from the lowest salary to the highest salary. Now, when I also add, for example, top 3 here or top 5 here or whatever number, right? When I add top, it means I only want that top end rows in the result, which means it's first like get the results sorted, right? And then only get show you the top 3 rows. Is clear? Yeah. And then we have predicates for better conditions. I included some examples here. And then finally, we talked about group by. That means grouping rows of data based on sharing the same values in one or more attributes. Like, for example, as I mentioned, you may have a table, right? For example, your staff table here. So in your staff table, you have, I'm not sure what was the roles of staff ID, use the same name. Okay, staff ID, name, department number. So, and then name, and then department number. And job years, and so on. So here, because we can have several staff working in one department, let's say, for example, staff ID 1 working in department B20, and then staff ID 2 also working in B20, and then staff ID 3 also working in B20, and then we have maybe staff 4 and 5 working in B10, department 10, and so on, right? So we have multiple employees working in the same department, and let's say this one is salary. So looking at this table, you can find the salary of, let's say this is 100K, this is 50K, this is 120K, and this is 200K and 100K. Okay, so from like this table, you can find what is salary of each employee, right? But you should be able also to find what is the average salary of employees in each department, right? And that is where we use group by, because if you want to find the average salary in, like, let's say in each department, forget about the SQL part. What do? You have to find out what are the salaries of all the employees in that department, right? And then finding the average. So you need to know what is the salary. For example, if I ask you what is the average salary of employees in department B10, right? You should be able to easily calculate that, because you have let's say there are only 2 employees working in this department. One of them getting like 200K, the other 100K, and then you tell me that the average is 150, right? So you have access to the salary of all employees. But what you're doing here is that you're grouping, right? You're grouping your data based on the departments, right? Because in this department, I want to find this average. And then in this department, again, we have like these 3 numbers with some averages, maybe 100, for example. And these are the average salary. So how does your result should look like? Your result should look like this. So in that case, your result will look like something like this. You have the table, right? With department number and average salary, right? So with department number and average salary. And then let's say we only have these 2 departments, in 20 and in 10. Here maybe the average is 105. Here is, I don't know, 150, right? So this is where you use group by. So if you want to, for example, if you have a table like this, you want to find, for example, the number of employees working in each department, or finding, for example, the average salary, minimum salary in each department. So you have both columns in the same table, but you have several instances of that values of that column, right? And you have several, for example, departments here. So you have to use aggregate functions such as, for example, average, minimum, maximum, count, depending on the question, right? To find out what is the result. So is this clear when we use group by? Okay. So if I want to find salaries of a specific employee, let's say I want to find out the salary of employee ID 2, should I still use group by? What is the salary of employee 2? 50K. So did you need to do any group by? Use any group by? No, right? You already have the salary for this employee. This is because here we have salary for each employee, right? But when I ask you, for example, to find out the average salary, do we have a column of average salary for each department? No, we don't have. So we have to use aggregate functions, and then we need to group the rows of data to find the average. Now, let's go to here. And then talk about aggregate functions like count, sum, average, min, max. So these are the things that we will use more. And one example was, for example, finding out number of employees, average, and minimum salary for each department. Easy, right? So if you want to find average salary, I already explained. Minimum salary for each department, exactly the same, right? The only thing is that instead of using average as aggregate functions, then you have to use min, right? To add, for example, min salary. Now, minimum salary in department B20, for example, is 50K, and minimum salary in department B10 is 100. Now, what about the number of employees, or counting number of employees in each department? So looking at the table, you see we have 3 employees working in B20, 2 employees working in B10. How do you do that using SQL? Using aggregate functions count, right? So you just write count. The reason I wrote count star is that what does star mean, like in SQL? We use it mainly for example, if you select a star from a table, right? It means all the columns, right? And when I write, for example, count star means count all the rows in that table, right? Now, if I write select count star from staff and then group by department number, what does it return? The query is not correct because, as I mentioned before, your select statement is limited to the filtering, the column that you use in your group by, right? For example, department number and aggregated functions. Now, let's say I correct it. Okay, so let's say you select department number, count star from staff, group by department number. What does it return? What does count star specifically return? Counting a star, what does it count in this table? So look at this query here, okay? So we are grouping data by department number, right? So you have this group, and then you're counting a star, counting all the rows within that group, right? Which are in this table, in the context of this table. What does each row represent? Employees or staff, right? So counting star here is returning the number of employees. If this was a product table, right, then count star would have returned number of products. If it was a student table, it would have returned number of students. Because each table, and that is why, for example, we at the beginning when we were talking about ER modeling, we mentioned we are assigning a specific or separate entity, right, for the objects that have, for example, let's say one entity for a student, right, and then this will be translated to your table student. And you don't put like other information in that for the integrity control, right? Because you want each row representing a unique student. Now, in a student table, each row represents a unique student. In product table, each row represents a unique product. In enrollment table, each row represents a unique enrollment, right? And here in staff table, each row represents a unique staff or employee. Now, when you write, for example, select department number, comma, count star from staff, group by department number, it means that you're grouping data based on this column and then counting number of employees in each department. And can I write count staff ID or count staff name? Yes. And then one important point here is that select is limited to only attributes and built-in functions, which means we cannot have, for example, select salary here, right? Can I write select salary? Can I write select salary from staff? Group by department number. Can we write this? No. You will get an error and you can try. And this is because you are selecting, let's say, first, you are grouping your data based on department number, right? Which means this. Which means in your result, you will have a table with only two rows. One row is department B20, one row is department B10, right? And then if instead of average salary or minimum salary, you write something like salary, this doesn't make sense, right? Which salary? We have several employees in this department, so we have several salaries in this department. Should I write 100K, 50K, or 120? So, whenever you are using group by, you cannot use any column in your select statement. You are only limited to any column that comes with aggregate functions. For example, you cannot use salary, but you can use average salary, right? Because when you specify average salary, then you know what number you have to write here, right? You're not confused like with this. Or if I say minimum salary, then I'm specifying this specific salary here, right? Because we cannot have like 100K, 50K, and 120K, right? This is against atomicity, right? This is not correct. That is why you will get an error. So your select statement is only limited to either the column that you used in the group by, and why is that? Why can you use that department number column here? Clear, obvious, right? Because you group by your data based on that. So this is already unique, right? So you already have one B20, one B10 here. So you can use that column because you use that in the group by. And you can use any other column as long as they come with aggregate functions like count, mean, max, sum, and so on. Any questions here? Yeah.
So we are gonna use technically group by whenever we are like getting something as a single value, right? Like average. Like
if you want to
mean,
find
like
a
max.
single value for multiple instances of one attribute, right? For example, single salary for each department, right? And then you have departments repeatedly. So this was some examples, like how many different jobs exist in company, how do you do that? We practiced this last week. How many different jobs exist in the company? So let me go here. So hopefully I'm connected. So just to remember what we had in the staff table. And why do I have this? Let me disconnect. Shouldn't barely lie. So it may take some time to load all the tables. Okay, so if you want to find how many different jobs exist in the company, and we have another column here. So we had one more column here, which was job, right? And then these may have different jobs. I don't know, one is a salesperson, one is manager, secretary, and so on. Different jobs. And then again, manager here, maybe, and so on. So if you want to find how many different jobs you have in this company, which table? First of all, you know that you have to write select and you have from. So these are like the minimum things you want to retrieve data from a table, right? Now, if I tell you I want to find how many jobs exist, which table should you get this data from? You have two tables, staff and organization. Job is in the staff table, right? So you write from staff. And then what do you put in the select part of your statement?
Distinct.
Distinct job. Okay, so what does it return? What does this query return? Select distinct job from staff. Yeah?
A list of all the jobs.
List of all distinct jobs. Let's say you have 3 distinct jobs, sales, manager, secretary, and then it returns those 3 jobs. Okay? But it returns the jobs. Does it return how many different jobs we have? No. So what should I add here? Morning. What should I add here? Count, right? Further, should I write select distinct count job or select count distinct job?
The distinct job should be in the brackets of the count.
Yeah, then select count distinct job, right? That is count of distinct job. And so let's see if we are having errors here. Okay, so this is your staff table. Now finding, for example, select count, and then if you specify your table first, it's better because then you will realize if you have typos in the column names. Select count distinct job, right? From staff. And then, and this is 3, right? You can also give a column name. So instead of like no column name here, because you don't have this column in the staff table, right? That is why you have no column name here. You can give it a name like as, you can use as count jobs, right? And then you have count jobs as a name here. Now, what was the second query? Whose salary is above company's average salary? So how do you write that query? To find out whose salary is above company's average. So for example, let's say the company's average salary is 100. Let's say average is 100K. Okay. So which staff IDs have a salary higher than 100K? Staff ID 3, staff ID 4, right? Now, logically, how did you do that? These are very easy. So how can you finding the employees that their salary is above company's average? What is the first step to answer that? Forget about the SQL, like mathematically.
You find an average?
Finding the average first, right? Average of the company's salary. So let's do that first, and then finding the employees that have salaries greater than that. So you want to find, select. Which aggregate function should I use? Average, right? Finding average salary, right? From staff. So this should give me what is the average salary, right? Here in the staff table, which is this number, right? 18,000 something. So you would expect to return how many employees? Those that have salaries higher than that number. For example, this is one, this is another one, and this is another one. So you should have, like in the result, you should have 3, and you should expect like 3 employees. So you can always check what you expect, right? And see if that makes sense, if your query is correct. So now finding, I want to like finding employees or staff. Finding employees for finding staff finding staff with company average salary, and then this one giving you average salary of the company. Okay. So when you want to write your queries, you always first check which table you want to get data from, right? So we want to find staff with a salary higher than company's average salary. So you should see which columns you need and which table contain those columns. For example, here we need a staff name, right? Staff ID, staff name, because we need to find out who's the staff have like higher salaries. And we also need the salary. And both of like these columns are in the staff table. So we know that we have something like select something, right? And then we have you know that you have something like select some columns and then from the staff table, right? Now, what do you want to select? Think about what your result should look like, right? So if I ask you, and forget about the SQL part, if I tell you, let me know the staff name, whose salary and their salary, of those employees that their salary is above the average of the company's salary, right? So the company's average, let's say, is 100K. And I want you to tell me who are those employees. How do you do that? So we said we first find the average salary of the company, and let's say that's 100K. And then we say, okay, this employee and this employee has salaries higher than that number. So in your report, you tell me, okay, these are the staff, right? Let's say staff name and salary, right? And you tell me, for example, let's say this is John, this is Alex, this is Mona, this is, I don't know, Sarah, and so on. So tell me, those are Mona and Sarah with 120 and 200K, right? So in SQL, you do exactly the same. So because you need a table with these two columns, right? So what should I write here? In the select part, so you need a staff name, right? So you need a staff name. What else do you need? Salary. From staff. Now, what is our condition? And what clause do you use to add conditions here? Let's say if I ask you finding employees whose salary is above 100K. If I ask you this question, what is the query? Finding out employees whose salary is above 100K. You write select the staff name, salary from the staff table. And what clause do you use here? Yes, where, right? Where salary is greater than something. This is exactly what we're doing here, right? So selecting the staff name and salary from the staff table, right? Where salary is greater than something. Now, what is that something? Average salary of the company, right? Which is here. This is the average salary of the company, right? So, and that's it. So this is exactly like I asked you finding out the staff with salary greater than 100K. Instead of 100K, I asked company's average salary. So one more step that you have to add this. So this is a nested query, and I'll keep this here. So to check the result with you. So in Windows keyboard, this Windows has issued like copy, right? Yes. I want to show you also the result. So this is your staff table, and here are the list of employees with salary greater than the company's average salary, right? Which is here. So is this clear? Now, another note, aggregate functions can appear only within the select clause and or the having part of the statement. So you don't know about having yet, so don't worry about that. I'll explain shortly. But the select clause, we already know that. So the aggregate functions such as, for example, count, sum, average. So like these are aggregate functions, right? They can appear only within the select or in the having part. So you cannot, I would have expected you here to ask me a question. Why can't I write this? So the question is finding a staff with a salary higher than company's average salary, right? Why couldn't I just simply write, let's be open here, my keyword doesn't really work here. Okay, why can't I write this? Why is this not correct? Yes?
Because it doesn't know which average salary it's taking it from. It can be from a different table.
We are specifying the table name from staff.
From staff.
Yes?
Is it because it checks row by row? And then the average of each row just gets like,
So we know the average salary of the company is just a specific number, which we already found, right? This is about the notes that I mentioned in the slide. So you cannot use aggregate functions. In SQL, you cannot use aggregate functions anywhere that you want, right? For example, you cannot use aggregate functions directly in the word class. So this will, if you type this, you will get an error, right? For example, let me delete this. Just want to show you the difference. You see, this is the error that you'll get. An aggregate may not appear in the where clause unless it is in a subquery content, for example, like the subquery that we will here. That's why you have to write it as a nested query here. So in my previous classes, I don't know, somehow students used to listen to me more, so they asked more questions. So they asked me, for example, why couldn't we simply write this? And this is the reason. And that's why you have to specify here this subquery, and then you won't get an error. Then this will work, right? Now, so this is what I just showed you. So this is an example. This will not work. This is not correct. And you will get this error. And this is another example. Finding number of products and average price for each vendor. This is another example of using a group by. So let's say you have these three tables. So your tables are product, right? Number of products and average price. So whatever we want already exists in the product table, right? So looking at the product table, you have the product name, you have list of products, you have price, vendor, and everything, right? Now, if I, and again, forget about the SQL query right now. If I ask you finding number of products and average price for each vendor, how do you answer that? So you have to find out the vendors, right? And then how many vendors do we have? PG and MK, right? So you know that your result should look like something like this. For each vendor, I want you to tell me what are the number of products and what is the average product price, right? So this will be your result. Now, based on the result, and that is why I'm recommending you to first forget about the SQL part if you don't know how to write that. If you know, that's perfect. If you don't know, just think about what would be the result, the resulting table that you would like to see, and that will really help you to write your query, at least partially. So because you know that you need some like 3 columns, vendor ID, count, star, and average product price, then you know that, and all those columns are from the product table, right? So you know that in your select part of your statement, which columns that you have to write and from which table. Now let's say you don't even know that you have to do group by right now. Now looking at this, you see that, for example, in your result, if I ask you to give me a report of that, you won't tell me, for example, PG, 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 MK, MK. Don't repeat that because I asked for each vendor, right? So this will how it looked like. So how did you do that? You grouped the data, right? So you grouped the vendors into like these two main vendors that we have in the table. So you grouped the vendors, and then you found number of products, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So you found number of products, which are basically number of rows, right? Count star refers to number of rows in that table, right? And in the context of this table, what would be that number? Number of products, right? If I tell you count star in the student table, that would be number of students, right? If it is count, for example, star in the staff table, we will give you number of employees, right? I'm talking about like that when we use it in the group one, right? Now, here, you can write count star, or you can also write count product ID, count product name, doesn't matter, right? It will give you the number of products in like each of these vendors. And we also want to find average product price. Because we have product price for like all of like these vendors, we can also find the average price, right? Using aggregate functions. So this is easy, right? Do you have any questions? No question? Yes?
You mentioned before that the count star isn't correct. What did you mean by that?
No, I didn't say it's not correct.
Okay.
No, count star here, return count of all the rows within each group. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 2 and 4, which are in this table showing the products. If you're not comfortable with star, you can also write count product name, counting products in each vendor. But because we are in the product table, count star means number of products. And so another note, when you use group by, select is limited to only group attribute and listing function. I actually mentioned that once, right? So if you use group by here, you can only either use this column that you use in your group by, or any other column as long as they are used with the aggregate functions. And this is an example. Now you tell me if this query is okay or not. Selecting department name, location, average salary, maximum salary, minimum salary, and count star. And I gave it a name, like this AS alias is just giving this a name. From staff and organization tables, where, and this is just to join like these two tables that I explain later, group by department name. So we are grouping the data based on department name. And when we use group by, what is the condition for the select statement? What is the limitation on the select part? Can you write any column in the select part of the statement? Do you remember this example I mentioned? So I said if you are grouping data based on department number, right? If you are grouping data based on department number, and let's say you want to find department number. How many distinct department number do we have? How many groups of departments do we have? 2, right? D20 and D10. D20 and D10. So whenever you are grouping data based on, for example, let's say department number here, you know that your result will look like something like this, like 2 rows with these departments. Now, if you write, as I mentioned, if you write job, select job, for example, or select salary from staff, and group by department number, and let's say department. What is the problem with this selecting department number and salary from staff group by department number? The problem is here if you write salary, you don't know which salary you have to write for each department. Similarly here, you are grouping your data based on the department name. So what is the causing problem here? Because this query is not correct. Yes?
There's the location that doesn't.
From the location, right? Because location is not the column that you use in your group by, right? And we didn't use it with any aggregate function, so we don't know which location. So if you write location here, we may have staff working in different locations within the same department, and we don't know which location. So this is not correct, and this will be the error that you will get. And this is more clear explanation of why. Let's say you have a table including these two columns, column A and column B. Now, if I write select AB from T, table T, group by column A, is this correct? And you already have the answer here, so please. Is this correct?
No.
No, right? It's not. Why? What is the problem here? Why it is not possible to select A and B when you group by A? Because which B? If you group by based on like this column A, your result should look like this, right? Should look like this. And for A equal to 1, which B should I write? Should I write A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I? What should I write, right? You have multiple values for like this grouped column, and you cannot find out anything. So you will get an error message. But if you write, for example, select A, instead of B, you write max of B, right? Then that's fine. Or count of B. Then will be okay, because then you know what you have to write here. And then we have having clause. Having, as I mentioned, like briefly explained before, is filtering the groups formed in the group by based on provided criteria. So it is similar to where clause. So we use where clause when we want to filter our rows of data, right? In our table, when we have a condition. For example, finding staff with salary higher than 100K. Finding staff who are working in a specific department. Finding staff whose job is manager, right? So how do you answer all these like 3 queries that I mentioned? Using the where clause, right? For example, if you want to finding staff whose job is, for example, manager, then you write, for example, select staff name from staff where job is manager, right? Job equal to manager. And having is very similar. The only difference is that it works after aggregation. It is after you already use group by, after you group your data. So having conditions normally apply to group data. That is, having often followed by group by, and it is often used to the built-in or aggregate function. So let's see some examples. Let's say I give you this query, finding out average salary for each department with more than 2 employees. Anyone wants to write that query? With a bonus? Average salary for each department with more than 2 employees. Let's go into the SQL, and this is your table. So we want to find the average salary. Salary is in the staff table for each department. Department is also in the staff table that have more than 2 employees. So all the information we want exists in the staff table, right? So I can simply write select something, right, from staff. Now, select what? Let's write the query here to make it easier. average salary for each department with more than 2 employees. How do you answer this query? So we said first step, we know that we are selecting from the staff table, right? Because the salary, department, and employee, all this information are in the staff table. Now, how do we know what column should be right in the select part?
So basically what we want to see, so the department number and the average salary.
Yeah, so we want, for example, let's say in your result later, right? So if you don't know, just write the result that you want to see, right? So the question is for each department. So in your result, you want department number, right? You want the result something like this, department number, average salary. But only those departments that have more than 2 employees, right? So in your result, for example, if department D20 has, if department, for example, D10 has 1 or 2 employees, you don't want to show that, right? You only want the average salary for departments with more than 2 employees. Let's say, for example, D20. So this is the expected output. So what should I write in the select? Department number, right? So you want department number. What else? You want also average salary. Do we have average salary here? No, not explicitly, but we can use aggregate functions, right? So we can have like average salary. So if you want your result including like this thing, average salary or any name that you like, you have to specify that using alias like this, right? As for example, average salary or any name that you like, average salary, whatever, right? So this will give a name here. If you don't specify that, you will get no column name. Now, as average salary from this, and then from staff, and what else? So we already know these. How do you add this condition?
With the having clause, say if the count of department numbers greater than 2.
Yeah, why do we have to use having? Why I can't just write where? Can we use where here? For adding like this condition, like departments with more than 2 employees. Like you have departments here. If you want to find departments with more than 2 employees, can I just write using where clause here? Yes?
No, because I think you have to group the departments first.
Yeah, we can, because we have to group the departments first, right? You get the result. So in your result, you want something like this. Let's say E20, E38, or whatever, right? So you only have the grouped values of the departments, right? So you need to use group by. Group by which column? Everyone. Department number. And now, can I use where now? Now that I use the group by? No. That is the difference between where and having, right? You use where for filtering data before aggregation, but now this is after aggregation, after group by, so we use having. Having, and then add your condition. What is the condition? We want those departments that have more than 2 employees, right? Now, number of employees should be more than 2. How do you write that in SQL? Number of employees, yeah?
In the select, you add the count.
In the select, we have count.
You have like add a count of the number of.
Yeah, but what should I add here in the having part? Same thing, right? Having count star, right? Having count star. Do you remember when I was talking about aggregate functions such as average, count, etc.? I said you cannot write them anywhere. you either have to use these aggregate functions, either have to use them in the select part of your statement or in the having. And at that time, you didn't know about having yet, right? But you can't use, for example, aggregate functions in where part. So having count star greater than 2, right? Is that correct? No. We've got only one, department number D20 with this average salary. Because if you check other departments here, department B38, this one only has 2, right? So this is not more than 2. B15 has only 1 employee. B42 has only 1 employee. So the only department that has more than 2 employees is this department. And next one, finding departments with average salary higher than company's average. This is similar to the previous nested query we had, right? So previously we had finding employees whose salary is above company's average salary. Now we have departments with average salary higher than company's average. And now you will see the difference. So did you understand the one, finding the staff with salary higher than company's average? So if you understood that one, you should be okay with this one too. So finding departments with, let's add it here, this or not. Departments with average salary higher than company's average salary. Now, in your result, you want to see something like this. Department number, because you want to find out departments that their average salary is higher than company's average. That their average salary is higher than company's average. So again, we should find out what is the company's average salary, right? So this is like I asked you, finding departments with average salary higher than 100K. How do you do that? If I ask you finding departments with average salary higher than, keep it simple, 100K. How do you do that? Because you want to find out departments with and salary, so these two information exist in the staff table. So if you look at the other table, which is the organization, it doesn't have salary information, right? So you need to work on this table. Now in this table, we want to find out the average salary for each department, right? So what you have to do, what clause do you use? If you want, let's say you want to find average salary for each department. Group by, right? You group your data, as I mentioned before, forget about the SQL part first and see what you're doing. So you have the salary for different employees in the department. If you want to find out the average, you group the data, you say, okay, in B20, I have these 3 salaries, and then you find out the average. So this is exactly the same here. So you know that you have to group data by department number. And then add in your condition. Now, if your condition is, for example, departments with average salary higher than 100K, it will be, for example, select department number and average salary, right, from the staff table, group by department number. So far, we grouped the data and we selected the columns that we want. And then add in your condition. After group by, should I use where or having? Having, right? Having, for example, average salary higher than 100K. Okay? So let's say this is 100K. We'll keep it simple first. And so for this, you write select department number, and then it's good to first write this so you see the typos. Department number and average salary. And then from staff, and it doesn't matter if it is higher or lower, right? This is not case sensitive. From staff. And what else? Group by what? Department number, right? Having average salary, right? Higher than some, for example, higher than 100,000, which in that table I think we don't have. Let's say higher than 80,000. And I don't know if this is the exact thing. So if you write this and you check your results here, so you will see departments with average salary higher than 18,000, right? Now, if the query asks you, instead of explicitly ask you higher than 100K, it asks you higher than company's average. So let's keep this one. And I will write this here. Instead of 100K, I write company's average salary. Then it will be easy. You write the same query, right? Same query. Instead of 100K, what should I write? What should I write instead of 100K? Or sorry, 18,000. So in that example, I use 18,000. Higher than 18K. So what should I write here? Yeah.
Select average salary from staff as like a nested query.
Yeah. So company's average salary. How do you find company's average salary? You write select average salary from staff. That's it, right? Now this should give you departments with average salary higher than company's average salary. And I have, I think, one more here.
I think the
Average
bracket,
not recognize the built-in function name.
the bracket needs to be around just salary, not from staff.
Oh yeah, I had one more here again. Yes, average salary from staff and then company. And I have typo, staff, and then we should be fine. So this will give you department number with average salary items. And you can, of course, give it also a name. Any name. And then in your result, you will see any name that you give to this column. So I keep things when it comes to the SQL practice, I keep things slow because I want you to practice with me in class. And I don't mind if it takes longer. I always adjust the assignment deadline accordingly, so don't worry about that. I'll make sure that I give you enough time. I want to finish everything, right, that we need for your assignment too. And if we need to further extend the due date, that would be it. Do you have any questions? No?